Okay, so let's do an overview of the hackathon and what to expect, as well as a little discussion about potential project ideas. So, first of all, what's the format of the hackathon? We're going to have about 60 students total from all over the community college district in San Jose. We're going to split into teams. It's going to be 5 to 6 students working on a project, so probably about 10 groups, 10 different projects going on. And time-wise for the hackathon, for the competition, at the max, I think we can expect about 10 hours to get as far as possible with our project. So that's a very tight window. And then, of course, there'll be some form of presentations of your project results and what you've come up with. Now, I think it's worthwhile to just take a couple minutes and highlight some of the things that we want to get out of this experience. It's going to be really exciting. The Malwarebytes offices are really just amazing to see. It's going to be very exciting to be in this, high-profile company environment. It's going to be very fast-paced, so I think it's good to think about going into the experience what ideally you want to get out. And so here are a couple different goals that I think we could all agree we'd like to get out of the experience. First, building a peer group. Maybe some of the 60 students there that will be assembled will know each other from previous classes and extracurricular activities, but I imagine a lot of you guys won't know each other going in. These are going to be great connections to make. If you're a CS student or you're someone who's got an entrepreneurial mindset or want a career in tech, it's really important to surround yourself with like-minded people who are thinking about and interested in the same things that you are. So this is going to be a fantastic networking opportunity, not just for you to get to know about the company and about the Cyber Defenders program and to meet your mentors and all that, but really, probably most importantly, to meet other people in your peer group that you can form meaningful connections with. You're going to have this hackathon experience. There's no reason why that sort of hackathon ethic or project-oriented way of doing things has to stop on Saturday with that event. If you meet some people who you really vibe with and get along with, maybe this is something you guys want to do on a weekly basis, to meet up and take on a project and work on it, or maybe take on a long-term project. Maybe that's the groundwork for some sort of startup idea you have. I mean, there are a lot of possibilities, but definitely making some new connections with your peers is a major positive outcome that I hope everybody gets from this experience. Another thing that we want to get from this experience, especially if you haven't done a hackathon before, is the opportunity to develop problem-solving skills and what I'm terming here adversity endurance. It's going to be kind of a confined window to execute a project in. You're going to have roughly a day to do it, but within that day, working for 10 hours straight on a project is a really big endurance challenge, and there are going to be all kinds of roadblocks along the way that you're going to hit. And if you haven't ever done an event like this before, it's a really valuable experience to just kind of build up your resistance to adversity, your ability to deal with mini failures and roadblocks and find a way to overcome them. That's really the name of the game in a hackathon. And if you haven't had a chance to do it before, this is a great place to start honing those skills, because while they're kind of, super kind of hyper brought out in the hackathon experience, they're also very valuable, of course, in your academic studies and the startup environment. Pretty much anywhere you go, that ability to kind of handle adversity and shift and pivot and keep making progress is super key. Another thing, of course, is to try and continue to cultivate an entrepreneurial mindset. I mean, this is an environment where you're really going to be given an opportunity to showcase your creativity and your ingenuity, and that's not something that's just innate in everybody. That's something that you cultivate. So this is a great opportunity to kind of jumpstart that or continue to develop it. Also, I hope the event will provide some inspiration and maybe even an additional sense of purpose for your CS education. You're going to be in this place where people who've gone through a CS curriculum at some point in their lives have transitioned it into an amazing career at an awesome company, and seeing what that really looks like and being in that environment and doing this hackathon, maybe that for you is going to bring out some extra level of focus and determination in what you do moving forward, now that you can really, viscerally see what that environment's like. And then finally, of course, it could be an opportunity to impress a future employer or an internship provider. If you have some really well-developed skills or can showcase some fantastic work ethic and creativity, that might catch the eye of somebody who can offer you a job at some point, or perhaps more likely in the short term, some sort of internship opportunity. That's if you're getting all the bullet points here above that, that's an absolute win. But if things go in the absolute best case scenario, maybe this is something that could happen. Having said that, especially if you haven't done a hackathon before, I think it's also useful to highlight some things that we might want to be on the lookout for, because this is a short event. But as I said, it is an endurance event, and there's all kinds of pitfalls. And if you know, or at least try to anticipate them going into it, you can navigate them, I think, more successfully. So first bullet point here, how are you going to handle in this sprint to execute a project hitting a creativity or problem-solving block? I can pretty much guarantee everybody who participates in this event is going to hit some point where either they're not sure how to move an idea forward or come up with the next idea in their project execution, or they're going to hit a problem, even more likely, where they don't know how to troubleshoot something that's not going right, and how you can handle those roadblocks and navigate them is really key. So go into the experience, of course, anticipating there's going to be a lot of that. Second bullet point here, how are you going to handle, quote, not pulling your weight or others not pulling your weight? This is another kind of guaranteed feature of the environment. We're probably going to have students who have a wide range of experience levels. So there's a pretty good likelihood that some of you are either going to be on a project team where you're surrounded by people who seem to have a little bit more experience or know-how with this stuff, or you're going to be the person who has the know-how, and you're going to be partnered and on a team with people who are a little bit newer to the idea, or less familiar or less clear on how to execute what you're going after as a team. And it's, the teams that will do the best in the hackathon are the ones that find a way to get everybody engaged and to, pull each other up and support each other in the ways that you can. And the ones that are going to have trouble are going to be the ones where these dynamics, reduce the overall productivity. And this is a really, good skill to start cultivating now if you haven't had a lot of experience yet in group projects at school. Almost any work environment or internship environment that you're going into is going to be teamwork based, and there's always going to be a situation where somebody's got a little bit more know-how or a little bit less experience, and finding the way to get the most out of each other is really essential. Kind of fitting on along with this, kind of contributing to that dynamic, the next thing I want to think about anticipating and preparing for is, how are you going to handle maybe a bit of fear or anxiety or of embarrassment and failure? Because, we're in this very cool environment doing this hackathon. It is a competitive environment. You're on a team. The results of your project are going to be known to everybody in that environment. If things start not going well in the execution of your project, or you hit one of these roadblocks, there's going to be some anxiety that comes up of, what if this doesn't come together? What's it going to be like, if other people see that we're not getting this done? That fear and nerves is normal. Everyone's going to experience it, but especially if you haven't done it before, try to lean into that and figure out how to ride it through, and use that kind of heightened energy to your advantage, because that's really a key skill that you have to do well in this type of hackathon environment. You gotta be able to get over those butterflies. And then finally, this again is a little bit synonymous, but also a good thing to anticipate. How are you going to handle having your ideas challenged by your teammates or your mentors or judges as your guys are crafting your project idea or figuring out how to execute it as a team? There's going to be a lot of group decision making that happens, and it's going to be a time stressed environment. So it's going to be really important to react well when you put forward an idea that you believe in and someone else disagrees, or someone else puts an idea forward and you don't think that's the way to go. How are you going to navigate those discussions productively? And additionally, if you proposing something or sort of bouncing an idea off a mentor who's sort of assisting with the process, and you get some feedback from your mentor that may not be the most productive way to proceed. How are you going to handle that? And then finally, it's a competition, so there may be, when you ultimately present your results, kind of an aggressive or challenging line of questioning from judges involved in the event. So, being able to handle questions about why you chose to do something, or, a suggestion that the way you chose to do something was not optimal, the way you handle those exchanges is going to be really key. And just to kind of summarize this slide, navigating these types of challenges is at least as important a part of the learning process as executing your project well, and possibly much more important, because of course the reality is, whatever the specific project you work on in your group for this hackathon, it'd be fantastic if that becomes the basis for a startup and is something that you remember vividly 20 years from now. But more likely, whatever you're doing 20 years from now is going to involve having to handle all of these kinds of challenges. So if you're taking the most of these opportunities in, kind of a simulated competitive environment like a hackathon to develop skills at handling all of these issues, which are also skills that are, going to be useful in internships and jobs, that's going to serve you very well in the long run. And that's a really important part of the hackathon, is providing an environment where you're working under pressure and you get a chance in a kind of a safe space to fail forward, if you will. You have a chance to work on your experience and your skill at handling these types of challenges. Okay, so I'll get off my soapbox now. Let's transition a little bit into talking about the actual projects. So what makes a good project? First of all, there are a couple things I want to highlight on this, just 3 bullet points. Number one, probably the most important one to keep in mind, is choosing a project that has the appropriate scale. I put 12 hours here on the slide. It's probably because we're going to have, Friday night and all day Saturday, but in reality, the actual time that you have to work on the project is maybe closer to just 10 or even 9 hours. So choosing a project that you can execute in that time frame is absolutely key. It's very, very easy, especially if you're less experienced, to wander into a project that isn't really feasible to tackle in that condensed time frame. So before you even start thinking about a project, I just want you to have this in your mind. It's going to be a very compact time frame in which you need to demonstrate some sort of progress in executing that project. So you want to choose an appropriate scale. Now, assuming that you've got something at the appropriate scale, the things that are going to distinguish great projects from mediocre ones are, does your project address an existing problem or need? That's really key. And then also, does your progress showcase ingenuity and skill? The best hackathon project is going to be one that is original, requires a lot of skill and creativity to execute, and meets a real world problem or need. So having said that, of course, how do you start thinking about a project? If you want to come up with something that satisfies those previous criteria, where do you even start? Well, a good place to start, of course, is your interests. If you're very experienced in the field already, if you've got great hacking skills and you're a programming whiz, you might just want to start. You might already have a clear idea of what your interests are. Beyond that, even, it might be true that in an area of interest to you, there's a problem that you already would really like to solve, or maybe there's something that is a tool you use or a challenge you have tried to meet before, and there's some aspect of that didn't work well and really annoys you. That's often a really great place to start with a project idea. God, this is a problem I've experienced before. I'd love to come up with a solution to it. That's really the space in which you start hitting this criteria of, does it meet an existing need? Now, finally, though, if you're brand new to the field, if you don't have a lot of cyber security experience, if you've just maybe taken one programming class previously and you thought this would be a really cool area to get some experience in, and this is kind of a very new thing that you're trying to do, you may not feel like you know enough yet to have strong interest or a good sense of the problems that need to be solved. In that case, I think it's really useful to think about what you have covered so far in your academic experience. What have you learned about so far? And is there a project you could come up with that's related to the material that you've covered? That's a perfectly fine place to start. So for folks who are, cyber hotshots, who are really at the tip of the spear and ready and in a place where they can do something really, really impressive. If you're trying to choose a project area, here are some what I would describe as kind of current frontiers in cybersecurity. These are areas where innovation is being done. There are probably some things that could be added to this list that I've overlooked, but I think this is a good starting point. So it's always exciting when you discover vulnerabilities in new devices and software. There's continually, a constant stream of new devices coming on the market or new apps or software coming on the market. If you can actually hack something that's out and commercially available, that's very, impressive and would be very impressive in a hackathon environment. If that was a project, that you chose to sort of focus on, that would be great. It's also, I think, sort of frontier or an area that a lot of people work in right now is adapting or developing cybersecurity tools for mobile devices. That's a whole new, paradigm that there's still a little bit of lag in getting good tools for cybersecurity professionals. So that's, an area, if you have some idea of how to do something that's creative and, again, of an appropriate scale in that space, that's very exciting. Another paradigm that people are trying to improve cybersecurity tools for is the cloud. So adapting or developing tools for use on cloud infrastructure in a cloud environment is a really exciting area. And then, of course, there's automation. We talked a little bit about this in a different presentation, but automating tools for specific use cases and also automating tools with AI, using machine learning to, make the automation of something even more enhanced. That's a very hot area. Additionally, I would add to that improving tool portability. So taking these tools, it kind of lumps in a little bit with the second and third bullet points here, but taking tools that exist and making them usable either on mobile devices or usable against mobile devices or cloud, things that are put in the cloud. That's a very exciting area. Additionally, improving big data processing. So having some improved way of taking the very large volumes of data that are common to most cybersecurity applications and improving the speed or the accuracy of processing all that big data is really an area of innovation. And then finally, identifying malware. There's always new malware being created, and there's an never-ending war to try to develop better and better tools for detecting malware, identifying it, understanding how it works, anything improving malware, defense against malware is a very exciting area. But if you're, again, somebody who's new, and we're going to kind of scope our project or draw from things that you've only taken this little intro course that we put together on cybersecurity prior to doing this event. If that's the scenario, maybe there are a couple of ideas that we could come up with, concrete ideas or at least starting points related to what you covered in the course so far, just intro to cybersecurity. So let's think a little bit. Let's put on our penetration testing hat. Okay, we did a whole module on penetration testing. So could you do a penetration test of a mobile app or a desktop app and report the results? Doing a competent and thorough pen test of a new piece of software is a very tall order and maybe not one that can be reasonably scoped to the hackathon, but maybe you could take an exploit that you could identify in a tool like Metasploit, and you could run it against a mobile app or desktop app or a list of different exploits and of using a known tool like Metasploit, and you could do a penetration test of some software and report your results. Maybe that's within the scope of something that could be reasonably done. Or to kind of invert it a little bit, maybe you could just identify one common vulnerability and test across a suite of mobile apps or desktop apps for that vulnerability, and again, report your results. That would also be a really interesting thing to do. Another idea here, maybe you could do a case study of a new exploit or defense technique and develop a report with visualizations that explain how the exploit or defense works. When we think about cybersecurity, as a field, a big component of that is education. Creating tools or explanations of hacks or defense techniques that can be rolled out to explain to other cybersecurity professionals or to lay people who need to understand what a cybersecurity professional is actually doing. That can be really valuable, and maybe that's within the scope. If you're brand new to the field, maybe that's within the scope of something you could approach for the hackathon. And then finally, maybe you could be on a team that's sort of pen testing oriented, and you could partner with another team that's network security oriented, and that network security team could actually stand up some virtual network infrastructure, maybe put it up in the cloud or something like that, and you could do sort of a primitive pen test of that, not of a specific piece of software or an app, but you could actually pen test a network that another team is setting up and trying to set up in a secure way. That could be kind of an interesting way to loop two teams together in an interesting project. Okay, so another module that we went through here was network security. So thinking about a couple of ideas that might be useful starting points for projects based on the network security module. Could you perform packet capture and generate meaningful analysis of the results? So for some of you guys who are brand new to the field of cybersecurity, just demonstrating that you're able to do some network surveillance and analyze all the data that you collect, that could be a really useful thing to do in our condensed time frame. That could be really interesting. Could you architect a network design scheme for a fictional startup and pitch your plan? Maybe you can take your team and pretend like you're the IT security group for a startup, and describe how you're going to set up a network design to optimize security for a startup, and consider factors like how they're going to scale up their architecture as their company grows, etc. That could be kind of an interesting and entrepreneurial oriented project. Here's another idea. Could you implement a model virtual network in the cloud for a fictional startup and partner with the red team group to pen test it? So that's feeding back to the last bullet point on the previous slide. Maybe that's something that you could do, and would give you a sort of concrete feeling of accomplishment to set up an actual virtual network and have somebody try to break into it and see if you can set up something that has good defense from the first design moving forward to the implementation. That'd be pretty cool. Could you set up a honeypot site and analyze the traffic it experiences? So a honeypot site is a site that is sort of vulnerable to exploits, and you could just, if maybe it's possible to set such a site up on the open internet and collect some information about the traffic that it gets and generate a report on that. That could be a really interesting project to do. Even in a short period of time, you'd probably see that there's a lot of automated vulnerability testing that's going on out on the open internet that would be useful to see, even within a short time period, the extent of that. And then finally, could you design a red team phishing scam or other social engineering exercise that an organization could use to test the cyber savviness or readiness of its employees? So this is a thing at, whether it's government organizations, startups, established corporate environments, IT security departments within these various organizations are constantly fighting an uphill battle to make sure that that the lay employees, the non-cybersecurity professionals, are able to use the IT infrastructure safely and minimize, vulnerability to social engineering. And one of the things that's commonly done is a red team phishing scam where the IT department will actually try to phish the employees to see if they can get them to give up their credentials. And then if they do, they penalize those employees or send them to additional training, and at the very least, it at least kind of keeps employees on their toes because they know that they're actively going to be red teamed by their own IT security department. So maybe you could come up with a project where you put together a red team phishing scam or some other social engineering exercise for an organization to use, for that purpose. Okay, and finally, the last module was automation. This is just a slide lifted from that presentation, but just to reiterate, a couple ideas that are automation related. Could you, do a project where you write a program that automates the use of a common cybersecurity tool like Nmap, T-Shark, or Metasploit, and uses that at regular intervals, does some analysis of the results, and delivers the analysis via email to a remote system administrator? That'd be a really cool automation related project. Could you implement a program that detects or prevents an automated attack? So, for example, could you write a program that uses T-Shark to detect and respond to a denial of service attack? Or how about a program that detects spam or phishing by identifying keywords in the body of an email? That would be pretty cool. You could, if you had a team that wanted to do the red team version of the spam or phishing, you could test your spam detection program on that email. That would be kind of an interesting way, again, to sort of align two groups in a common area. Okay, again, those are all just a few ideas. A lot of these ones in the last three slides are fairly basic, but they are, I think, some starting points that you could use to start thinking about something that you feel really encouraged about. And again, if you're lower on the experience level, if this is a new field for you, I think it makes sense to choose something that's very closely related to what you already did in the Intro to Cybersecurity course, and you can just kind of build up from that. And if you have more ideas, we'll have a little time at the beginning of the hackathon to sort into teams and pick those ideas. You'll have mentors there to give you some feedback, and we'll take it from there. So I look forward to seeing all you guys. Thanks.